Hi team, my name is Bailey Locklear, and this is my proposed ethical code for media creators or media arts in general. So the overarching idea that I had was that no piece of art is worth the undue harm of the people involved, and that we as creators must be aware of our lasting impact on people and this planet. So pretty much all in all, I wanted to make sure that we talked about what we are subjecting the people involved in these films to in order to create them. But this is the roadmap that I have proposed. So the number one icon is safety. Number two is preservation. Number three is humanity. Number four is representation. And number five is integrity. So I mainly wanted to focus on the people involved in making these films and less about the films themselves. So the key to enforcing this code is to embody the above framework into your daily decision making. So in virtue ethics, you pretty much just want to make sure that you are taking into account that there can be multiple different contexts for a situation, and that we are looking more towards the good of people and the good of the decisions. But the first keynote I wanted to talk about was safety. And in week 7, we learned about Harvey Weinstein and the Frontline interview, our documentary about everything that he had done in the film industry, and how everybody in the film industry pretty much knew what was going on with these women and accusers, and decided to say nothing and decided to turn a blind eye because of the power that he had. But I also wanted to talk about the in-company protocol that I watched in The Assistant, because she does go to the HR rep and he does pretty much dismiss everything that she's saying and try to lean her away from a certain conclusion that she has apparently drawn throughout the day. But all in all, I believe that if we just start to believe accusers more and not try to discredit women whenever they come forward, or victims in general, then it definitely would lead to a lot better outcome. But with integrity, I wanted to make sure that we are double checking the trust of our audience. So I wanted to make sure that instead of trying to frame a story in a certain way, that we keep the integrity of it in its original sense, and especially in the editing room as well. Because you do have a responsibility to your subject, as they have signed up on a certain context of this film or text. And so you do have a responsibility to your subject to keep that, as well as if you did make a mistake and you, for some reason, your audience takes something that you said a certain way and comes to a different conclusion than what you thought, and new evidence is presented, I believe you should be able to still change your position afterwards. One thing I struggled with duty ethics in this chapter was the immoral action, no matter how beneficial the results, cannot be justified. Because in the sense that when we watched Tiger King, you were watching the documentary of a terrible person, per se, in the week 8. You are trying to document that interaction, as well as trying to provide information to your audience and to your user base to make sure that they, I guess, can recognize good from wrong. But then also it can also have negative effects in the sense that it becomes reality television, and it just becomes for show instead of for a better understanding. In preservation, I wanted to talk about the industry standards, specifically in week 14, when we were talking about the environment and the film industry as a general, their impact on the environment and the terrible choices that they have made in the past, specifically in like the 1920s. But with those industry standards, I believe that we should be able to protect the environment because it has inherent value, not because of the value that we as humans bring to it. But then also, I do not agree with the documentary on minimalism, that it's pretty much all based on personal choice, and that I do agree that we should be able to recognize and be able to distance ourselves from capitalism and pretty much everything that entails. But then I also do disagree with the documentary in the fact that I do not believe that it is personal choices that will be able to impact, but the decisions of the bigger companies that are the ones that are really making a disastrous choice to pollute the planet. But we have chosen as a collective to go into a career that has affected the planet in various different ways and negative ways in the past, especially in the 1920s. And we cannot continue to shift blame to individualism, and in the fact that it's just a company and I only work for them, I can only do so much. But I also wanted to talk about the humanity element, which was in week 4 about the power imbalance, the documentary of the children in India taking photographs in the distance between viewer and subject, and then creating a balance between both your creator and your subject and the power imbalance that is inherently there in the beginning. But you also want to make sure that you have authenticity without compromising those boundaries. So I did disagree in the way that the lady or the documentarian was too involved in the children's lives, I believe, because at some point it becomes an act of charity instead of a documentary. And at that point, I believe that your point of view and the view of your audience can become very skewed very quickly. But then also in week 9, when we were talking about the thin line between offensive and funny, I believe that I heavily believe that the regaining of power for minorities and oppressed groups to make fun of their oppressors is inherently ethical, in the sense that it is a way for them to express themselves safely. It does not provide any sort of subjugation in the real sense of the word and oppression in the real sense of the word, because they do not have the power to do so, unfortunately. But also, I do not believe that no person decides for an entire group. So then talking about later in week 11 about the cultural appropriation, I can't agree with the fact that we read the article about Beyonce and how specifically 2 women were like, she's actually not an oppressor because we say so as these type of, or as this minority of women. Because I also do not believe that for representation to matter, you have to have a very broad sense, and you cannot just take the first person that speaks up on Twitter, for example. But then also with repeat offenders like Katy Perry, I believe that there is an inherent issue that should be talked about, especially to her, so that she can maybe have a better understanding. But in this sense, I don't believe that that's going to happen. I do believe that it's a very sticky situation, because you do have appropriation versus appreciation, which a lot of the times you can have good intentions, like with duty ethics, but you are choosing to do an immoral thing. You can have good intentions, but you are blinded by the fact that maybe as a white person, you have never felt or you have never experienced oppression in that sense. And so you cannot truly understand what they are going through. But I believe on a personal basis, as long as you are not inherently or publicizing it, you cannot harm inherently another person if you have good intentions. But I do believe the context matters, absolutely. But in week 13, I do agree with the regulating digital content in that free speech protects, but it also hurts. So private companies are giving these people a platform to speak because they inherently have the right to do so. But also, as private companies, they are not exempt, or they are exempt in the sense that they do not have to allow that at all, which I do not agree. I agree with, in the sense that they should be monitoring this a lot more than they are, instead of just shifting the blame. But I think in week 10, when we talked about the past depictions of racism and sexism, that it's better to learn from others' mistakes and to listen from that, instead of making them yourselves and continue to do that. But I do disagree in the fact that, like how Disney has just erased the past and their past mistakes, you cannot learn that way as well. So for the conclusion of my presentation, I believe that we all have a responsibility to uphold virtue ethics in our lives and make decisions for the right reasons. And to do that, you must never violate anyone's humanity, no matter the beneficial results to yourself. But for my feedback, what improvements can I make in my ethical code? Is there anything that I did not think about? And is my ethical code that allows for improvement and second chances acceptable in our day and age to you? Do some offenders not deserve a second chance? Specifically talking about Harvey Weinstein, because I hate him. But yeah, thank you guys so much for sticking around. I love this class and I think it was really great. But I hope everybody has a great summer. Thank you.